Tonight is the last session of Taharat HaMishpacha, family purity laws, and tonight is very different than the other weeks. The past weeks, besides an introduction to what family purity is, we went over, I think it was 7 weeks, of the various halachot and details that pertain to that area of Taharat HaMishpacha, family purity, what applies to the men, what applies to the women. Very important area. Halachot that one needs to know, one that is married, or one that is contemplating getting married soon. Tonight is quite different. We'll be covering what I would perhaps describe as halachot nosafot, additional halachot, additional ideas, all sorts of segulot, tikkunim, that have some connection with Taharat HaMishpacha, but not necessarily. They apply a whole year, regardless of whether the woman is anidah or not. And perhaps it's most related to the topic called kedusha, holiness. How a man and woman, Jewish husband and wife, are supposed to conduct themselves when they are together, and as we go on, we'll cover other areas too. They're all related, and that's why I left it towards the end. In the Torah, Allah Baruch Hu reminds us, Kedoshim to you, that we should be holy. The rabbis tell us, what does holiness mean? Kadesh et atzmecha b'ma shemutar lecha. It does not only mean to stay away, maintain a distance from that which was prohibited to you in the Torah, which also will bring about a holiness, but even that which is permissible. Mutar lecha, even in that area of what is permissible, there are levels of kedusha. Kadesh et atzmecha b'ma shemutar lecha. What is mutar? There are also levels of kedusha. One can become holier and rise to great heights, great levels of kedusha, by knowing to control himself in the various areas that we're going to be discussing. So let's begin with the first important area, and that is the intimacy between husband and wife, and I'm going to call it in Hebrew chibur, the connection between the two, the physical connection between the two. It's a very important connection, and the importance of this connection is seen in 3 areas. The most important area, and perhaps this is the right order. Area number 1 is the area of pru'urvu, that the reason husband and wife are together is to fulfill their part in the creation as partners together with HaKadosh Baruch Hu in procreating and in what's called kiyum hamim, in preserving the human species in this world. It's a mitzvah, lifrot v'lirvot, to multiply, to procreate, and the minimum to fulfill the mitzvah is to have a boy and a girl. That's the halacha. But a woman also needs to get married because she has at least the responsibility of settling the land. She doesn't have the commandment of pru'urvu, to procreate, but of settling the land. Lashevet Yatzara, HaKadosh Baruch Hu created this world that it should be inhabited, not that it should be a wasteland. So she partakes in that concept of inhabiting the land. But you're right, she does not have the commandment of pru'urvu. Nevertheless, she cannot stay alone, she cannot stay single, she needs to find a mate for other reasons too. And without a woman, a husband cannot fulfill the mitzvah. So ultimately, it's incumbent upon the two of them. It's a responsibility of both male and female to get married just in order so they can fulfill this mitzvah. That's all. Husband and wife who are married and do not have children, of course, they are lacking this mitzvah. Many years have passed, and after many prayers, many segulot, blessings of tzaddikim, nothing helps. They may want to consider adopting, because one who raises a Jewish orphan, it's like he gave birth to him. It's not the exact same mitzvah as having your own child, but it's still a very powerful mitzvah, and it's definitely worth something. It's almost comparable to having your own child, because you will be educating that child, right? You will be teaching that child. You will be raising him or her as a Jew. So it's also a beautiful mitzvah. One who does not have children, according to the Kabbalah, that is one of the automatic gilgulim. There are times that a soul comes back in reincarnation, and one of those times is because it does not have children. But I'm not going to say that that's always the case, because there are all sorts of reasons of why people have no children. So, but that's just to give you an idea that it's very important to have children, to have a family. No. It's just they're missing out on a mitzvah, and they have to come and fulfill it again somehow. They have to make up for it. All right, so that is the first idea of the connection between the two. And as a result of the importance of this connection, even though there is a minimum of a boy and a girl to fulfill the mitzvah, Shlomo HaMelech reminds us, and the rabbis infer from the following words, that he says, that בבוקר זרעת זרעך ולערב על תנח ידיך אינך יודע איזה ישר הזה או זה והם שניהם כאחד טובים. In the morning, in your youth, you should plant your seed. But in the evening, you should not let go your hand, because you do not know which one will turn out to be better, or if the two of them at all will come out good. What Shlomo HaMelech is inferring, what is inferred from these words, is that even though you've had children in your youth, does not mean that you should stop. That's it. I'm too old to have children. There is a mitzvah to continue on. There's no maximum. There is a minimum for the mitzvah. There's no maximum. And of course, depending on the circumstances, I don't mean economical or financial circumstances, because that would be a lack of bitachon. If somebody would say, I cannot have, or I don't want to have more because of finances, that shows a lack of bitachon, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu provides for every child. But if there are other medical reasons, or simply there are certain difficulties in having more children, we'll talk about that towards the end of tonight's session, about when is it permissible and under what circumstances can one have use contraceptives. But ordinarily the mitzvah is that you go beyond the minimum, and everybody needs to, at some time, decide how many, even though we don't have plans, like, sometimes the goyim plan it all out in advance. We don't have those plans that they do, but approximately one, depending on his situation, needs to continue having children, even though he has already had them while he was young. Later on as well, when he gets older, as Shlomo Melech says, you don't know which one is going to come out better. It could be that the first children, when you were young, were not so smart, were not so dedicated, and it could be the children that you did not think of having, perhaps, later on turn out the best children, the most devoted children. One does not know. So he continues to try. They continue to have, as long as the HaKadosh Baruch Hu provides his blessing and they're capable, and I'm just speaking in general terms right now, depending on everybody's personal situation, they should continue. So even though there's a mitzvah to have the very minimum, the boy and a girl, that is only a minimum. The second concept of the physical intimacy between the husband and wife is the mitzvah of onah. Like the Torah says, husband should not deprive his wife of that very special attention that he needs to give her. And it works the other way around too. The woman cannot deprive her husband of that special attention that she needs to give him. It's the two of them that need to provide each other. I call it emotional therapy, but it's much more than emotional therapy. It's actually a mitzvah to give that attention, to give that time. The Torah calls it onah. Onah means time. What you're doing is giving time. We're busy the whole day. You give time, and you give, of course, much more than your time to satisfy the emotions or the feelings of each other. So this builds a connection, a strong connection between the husband and wife, and this is the second idea behind the physical intimacy, a physical connection between the two. And it's a mitzvah. The third idea is for health reasons. A man, when he settles down and he gets married, there are times that for health reasons it's important that he be with his wife. I'm going to spend a little bit more time on the first two, actually the second one, which is most relevant for tonight, and that is the connection between the two, the physical intimacy, how it's done, and what the proper conduct is. Yes? I didn't understand your question. Down syndrome children, right. What about them? Right. It all depends. If we're talk about it later on, if something already happened, in other words, or if something did not happen. If a woman continuously gives birth and she started early on, she doesn't have to have those concerns. Obviously, if it's at a later stage and there are health issues, then you need to be concerned about that. If you know lechatchila, the problem is we don't always know with certainty if there's going to be a problem. We don't always know with certainty. What? Right. So you have to pray to HaKadosh Baruch Hu that everything should be okay. No. Unless there's a certain degree of certainty, there's issues related to the health of the woman and so forth, then of course she needs to consult with a doctor and a rabbi. But if there's no, you cannot be certain 100%. It's all in the hands of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There are certain precautions that we do take, that we know that traditionally cause problems, and that is between first cousins. First cousins, it used to be, in the days of the Gemara, that first cousins was encouraged. Today it's not encouraged. It's not encouraged because we've seen too many problems. So it's not asur. It could work out perfectly fine, but we have seen many problems. So that's something that we are aware of. You understand? Okay, so this second concept of the importance of physical intimacy, because it's a mitzvah, it means that the husband cannot say he's tired. And not only can he not say he's tired, he cannot rush through it either. Because as we just said, the amount of time, it's the attention that he's giving to his wife that's important. Because it's a mitzvah, he has to, in other words, be concerned about it. You can't just minimize it. That is the physical connection. In the proper conduct between husband and wife, there's something called kedusha. When we talk about Kedusha, we mean the thoughts. It's very important that the two of them have the right thoughts, that the two of them are thinking about each other and not about somebody else. Because, as we've said, I think in the introduction, depending on what their thoughts are, they're actually influencing what kind of children they're going to have, what kind of neshamot are going to come into that body. So this physical intimacy is divided into three parts. The Kedusha, which involves the thoughts. The Chibah, the affection that needs to be there. And number three, the Tzniut, which we're going to talk about more in length. So the Kedusha, I think most of you understand, it's a very special time, it's a very special moment. It's not just something that happens. It's something that you prepare for, and if you prepare for it properly, it can make a big difference for the husband and wife, but especially for the children. The Chibah, when I talk about Chibah, the affection that needs to occur, the rabbis tell us the husband has to be very careful, so does the wife, not to have gotten into any fights prior to that night. During that day, they should be extra careful because they don't want to be together when each one is upset at the other. So there has to be preparation in the area of affection. In other words, you don't just rush to it, you don't just force it. It has to be done emotionally, with emotional preparation. And emotional preparation means that the two of them have to be tzanu about it and not openly discuss it, but somehow beremez, with a hint, show an interest in each other. And each one may have their own way of showing interest, but the rabbis have said that that's the correct way for the woman to do it, is not to openly request that attention, because that's pritut. It is not proper for a woman to openly request from her husband for that time. She should insinuate it, she should hint it, she should dress up nicely, show extra affection. And the same with the husband. In order for him to impress upon his wife and to prepare her emotionally for this, it has to be done with affection, not by force. And when we say by force, if one of them is sleeping, you cannot force it. So you have to be careful. And I'm not going to go into all the details that I could go if I wanted to, because it's not proper for me to do so. So if you have a personal question that you want to ask me in private. I have to be very general over here. It's not correct for me to go into every single possibility and how to do everything properly. But I'm giving you a general idea that chibah is extremely important. Chibah meaning affection. There has to be a certain degree of affection leading onto that, and during that time too, that the two of them are together. Now we're going to talk about tzniut, which is also very important here. When we talk about modesty, it means as follows. Number one, the halakha says that the best time for this is in the middle of the night, not early in the evening. Why in the middle of the night? Not only does the Kabbalah say that that's the best time, but in the middle of the night usually most people are asleep, which means people are unaware. People should not be aware that the husband and wife are together. Nobody. They should, in the middle of the night there's no noise from the outside, so the man and woman are not interrupted. They may think about something else all of a sudden. So the middle of the night offers the best advantages. That's number one. That's all part of tzniut. Another idea of tzniut is very similarly that even if you have a baby, a nursing baby, that may be in the same room, it's best when the baby is asleep. If the baby could be in a totally different room, that's even better. But sometimes if the baby is nursing, you may need to nurse, it's okay to leave the baby as long as the baby does not know how to talk yet. In other words, once the baby reaches the age of 2 or so, and it begins to talk, you should not be in the room whatsoever. Especially if the baby is awake. If the baby is not awake, it's not a big problem. If the baby is sleeping, it's okay. But it's better if he's in a different room. If you have to keep the baby in the same room, and it's a nursing baby up to the age of a year or 2, then ideally he should be asleep. All of this is also because of tzniut, and because you don't want to be interrupted for a variety of reasons. During the time a husband and wife are together, there's no talking allowed about business, about how was your day, what did you do, what are your plans tomorrow. The only talk, the only conversation that is permissible and actually encouraged is any talk that involves the intimate. Husband or wife wants to reassure each other, they want to prepare each other mentally, emotionally. That is permissible before and at the same time, as long as it's reserved for that topic alone. In other words, the whole conversation or the few words should be related to preparing themselves emotionally. Nothing else is permissible. It's asur. The halakha says it's prohibited to talk about other things. What did your mother-in-law tell you on the phone an hour ago? I said, mother, I meant your mother, right? Or, why did you cook this for dinner tonight? If it's not related, asur. That is sicha yetera. That is excess conversation, which is not permissible during that time. The rabbis tell us that after 120, when one goes upstairs, they will judge him for those words, excess words that he said during the time that he was together with his wife, that was not related to making her feel good. Because if the words are to make her feel good, things that are related to prepare each other emotionally, fine and correct. That's good. But anything else, assume. That also has to do with sniut. About 12:01. I'm going to get to the other parts of the day. The proper conduct is that the Torah says, "V'davak v'ishto vayu lebasar echad." They have to be one, which means that there's no separation between the two of them, no clothing. Now, even though that's the case, in order for it to be b'tzniut, they have to be covered. It's also called pritzut if the two are uncovered. They have to be covered. Even though a husband is allowed to see his wife, and the other way around, you can't look at other women, certain parts. Husband is allowed to. There are certain areas that is prohibited for even the husband to look at. And I don't think I have to explain. But for the most part, it's okay. Now, one of the reasons that I did not mention, but now you understand why it needs to be done at night, is because at night it's dark. Which means, by the way, that you should not turn on the lights, even a closet light, even a little bit of light. There should not be, only in order to avoid coming to see that which you are not allowed to see. So what happens if it's during the day? During the day, customarily, the halakha says a husband and wife should not be together. Lechatchila, usually. Unless it happens, they're in some part of town, in the hills, where there's nobody, there's no noise. In that case, it's okay, as long as the room is dark. As long as the room is shut, of course, the windows, the curtains, and it's completely dark, then it's permissible. Otherwise, one has to be careful because of tzniut, that he should not come to see that which is prohibited for him. Okay, all of that is tzniut, and so is the following halakha. Let's say a husband and wife are invited to somebody else's house. You're a guest at somebody else's home, not your parents or your in-laws, which you may regularly come, but you're invited to somebody else's home. Whether it's a trip, long distance, whether it's local, the halakha says you cannot be together unless you have your private quarters. And what I mean by private quarters is that it's completely separate from the rest of the house. You have a lock. You don't share a very thin partition between this room and the next room where everybody can hear things, what's going on. It has to be completely private and secluded, where nobody would know, that you have your privacy. In other words, that privacy is very important. The other problem is when you are a guest at somebody else's home, you can't use the sheets, the bedding of that person. They may become dirty. So if you can avoid all of that, you have the seclusion, the privacy, and you can avoid soiling the other person's bedding, then it will be perfect. Otherwise, it's best to just push it off and not be intimately involved in somebody else's home. All of this is, of course, important to know because we explained last week that the Leil Tevilah, the night of the Tevilah, is a mitzvah, much more than any other night. And what happens if the Leil Tevilah is at that time, when you're somebody else's home? So you have to weigh the situation. It's not always permissible just because it's Leil Tevilah and it's mitzvah. If the circumstances don't allow for it, she may have to push off or something else. Okay, all of this is mitamei tzniut. All this has to do because it's... What do you do if there's books in the room? Not Shakespeare. When I say books, I mean Sifrei Kodesh, Gemarot, Chumashim. That could happen. If at all possible, of course, they shouldn't be in the same room. But if they are in the same room, you can either make a mechitza, cover them, or somehow separate yourself from this. If you have no choice, it's a Leil Tevilah situation, then as long as you're completely covered, very well covered, then it's okay with the Abba, but not lechatchila. Lechatchila, one should be careful to have some sort of mechitza between themselves. There are some days during the year that it's customarily not a good idea for husband and wife to be together. I'm not talking about the days a woman is a nidah, but the first night of Pesach, the first night of Shavuot, the 2 nights of Rosh Hashanah, the night of Simchat Torah. This is besides, of course, Tisha B'Av and Yom Kippur, that is a sur. So these days are, according to the Ari Al-Pia Kabbalah, that it's not a good time. It's not a sur, but it's not recommended. So obviously, depending on the circumstances, depending on the situation, if it's Leil Tevilah or not, it may be permissible. I just wanted to give you the days so you should know that there are certain days in the year that are not recommended. Or, for example, if a husband and wife, one of the two of them are avelim, they're in mourning, with the shiv'ah, it's a sur. That would be another example of when it's a... Okay, yes.
So
it's fine, correct. Leil Tevilah is a big mitzvah. So these days, because they're not sur, it's only al-Pia Kabbalah that they're mentioned. Nevertheless, because it's Leil Tevilah, we consider that more important. There's something about Kivun HaMitah, the position of the beds, north to south, east to west. Some of you may have heard about it. There are different opinions as to in which direction should the beds be facing. According to the Kabbalah, east-west. According to the tradition that most of us follow, it's north-south. That is the preferred if possible. If at all possible, the preferred position. Therefore, when you're building a new home, you take that into consideration. You know how the Chinese, I think, or the Japanese, what do? Feng Shui? Alright, I don't remember what it's called. They try to figure out the corners of the home, the windows. Other people try to consider lighting and so forth. We consider this. In which position will the bed be in the master bedroom? That is a consideration. Right. According to the Kabbalah, there's also east-west. There are various opinions. The head should be north, if possible. But if you could, the head should be facing north. But if the head is facing south instead of north, it's also okay. Yes? The head? That, according to the Kabbalah, there is an opinion, according to the Kabbalah, that the head should be facing more or less, as long as the legs are not facing. That's according. That is an opinion brought down in the Kabbalah. But we follow the other opinion traditionally. Traditionally, we follow the other opinion, which is also important for other reasons. Also, there is a benefit of north and south. There's various opinions. So it's okay, whichever you follow. I'm just telling you, traditionally, we follow the opinion north-south. It's better. Definitely better. If at all possible, that should be the position. And if the head is not a north, then the head could be south too. Whatever you do, the legs should not be facing you. Depending which opinion you follow, there are various. It's the position. It has to do with the position we face when we pray. What? No. It has to do with the Shekhinah. It has to do with the Kabbalah. You don't have to know the reasons for it. According to the Kabbalah, the head should be facing you. According to the Kabbalah. The legs should never be facing the east. The legs. Right? The head, according to the Kabbalah, faces the east.
I don't know.
Right. But traditionally, that is the position of the bed, if at all possible, north-south. That is what we follow. No, mostly for husband and wife. What? Yeah, sure. Yeah, but the importance is, okay, when a woman is pregnant, just because she's pregnant, it doesn't mean that there's no mitzvah or not. Mitzvah will not apply even when a woman is. However, the rabbis divide up the pregnancy into 3 parts. The first 3 months, the second trimester, and the third trimester. And they say that the first trimester is a little difficult for the child and for the woman. The second trimester is a little difficult for the woman, but it's good for the child. The third trimester is good for both. So even if the doctors tell you the third trimester is not such a good idea, don't pay attention in this case. Because it's on the contrary, the rabbis tell us it's good for the woman and it's good for the child. Obviously, it might be a little bit difficult, perhaps, but it's proper, it's a mitzvah, and it's good, and it's healthy for the woman and for the child. It's fine. But throughout the whole pregnancy, there's no isur. On the contrary, there is a mitzvah, and one does not have to have any concerns about it whatsoever, especially during the last trimester. Okay, before we go, they know certain things, but they don't know everything with certainty. There are certain things that there are theories, and I know facts. So they say a lot of things, but when you're asking, is that an opinion, theory, or a fact? And that's when you see what they're telling you is correct or not. They might say, we don't recommend it. Why not? Well, because of it causes excess stress. Who says so? We think so. If we think so, then we have a different. All right. So far we've talked about the importance of the kedusha between the husband and wife. All of this is very important and it's very good, and it can affect the children. But it is not sufficient if a woman does not cover her head. A woman might think she's doing everything properly. A husband might think he's doing everything correctly. But if she goes with her head uncovered in the street, that in itself may prevent her from having the zechut of bearing children. Many women could not understand why they could not have children for many years until they finally took upon themselves to cover their hair, and all of a sudden they were blessed with a child. But sometimes that thin cloth, that thin piece of material, is the only thing that's separating the mother from having a child. That's all it could be. Remember, a woman does not have many mitzvot like a man does. And if that one important mitzvah, even though it's not a mitzvah in the Torah, but the Torah basically requires it of a woman. If she does not keep that in mind, she may be holding herself back from having children, from being blessed with children. Or even if she has children, she may not be as fortunate to have the best children. In other words, the lack of kisui rosh, covering one's head, can bring about a kitrug, some sort of accusation on the woman or on the woman's children. Yes. Yeah, it's all somewhat related. All these topics are connected. Right, in the house itself, of course, a woman doesn't have to cover her head when she goes to sleep. But it's traditionally, women should cover their head, whether it's outside in the street or whether it's inside the home, unless she's in bed. Some women cover their head even while they're in bed. That is, it's proper unless she's with her husband. That's really different. You don't cover your head when you go into the shower, right? Either. But if you're going to sleep and it does not bother you, does not interfere, then why not have it covered all the time? It helps the woman in her kedusha, in her level of kedusha, in her zechuyot. As the rabbis tell us in the Gemara, there was one woman who never, throughout her whole lifetime, allowed the beams, the ceiling in her home to see her head uncovered. She had a tremendous big zechut as a result of it. So as much as possible, even in one's home, the woman's hair should be covered. She's in bed, it's not as a necessity. What? She had very special children. Remember, the zechut of children and what kind of children comes about as a result of the ma'asim, or the deeds of the father and mother. Besides how they prepare themselves towards it. I'm just finished this. Now, I only spoke about a woman now, doing her share, her part. A man too. If a man is kovei tim la Torah, he learns Torah, he gives money to charity, he also has zechuyot. And that also helps him to have children. So it could be sometimes that the reason why the two of them don't have children, it's not because of the woman's fault. She could have. It's the man's fault. He can't. Why can't he? Maybe there's something that he's lacking. Maybe he's missing some zechut. Okay, do you want to ask something?
Yeah, when he goes in.
Right, of course. When a woman is in public, regardless of where she is, she should have her head covered. Sure, either with a wig or with some other head covering, right? At all times when a woman is in public, but even at home, amongst her children, she's walking around, the head should be covered. Yes. Problems with sheitel, with wigs, is some of the ones that are human hair resemble so much natural hair that you can't tell the difference. That's a big problem. It's a big issue. Yeah. Some rabbinic authorities are more lenient with wigs. See, the wigs of once upon a time that were very obvious wigs, you could tell it was, it's not a problem. Because what's the difference between that and another head cover or a hat, right? But the wigs of today are more problematic. And I can understand the rabbis who were against it. I can definitely understand it, right? Yeah, right. I just said that some rabbis are more lenient. They're more lenient with wigs because if you get used to it, if you get used to wigs, you can tell if a woman is wearing a wig or if it's her natural hair. And only her natural hair is really asur. The problem is, for some people who cannot distinguish between the two, it almost looks the same. Some of the wigs, that especially the human hair wigs, are so similar. With a regular hat, it's not so good because the hat, you may not be able to cover the entire head. If you're able to cover the entire head and only a little bit of hair is sticking out, that's okay. So a hat, is not the best. Either the cloth, I don't know how it's called in English, some sort of scarf, or a good wig. Yes. Yeah.
Either way, it's more attractive. Either way, most likely, whether it's a pet show, generally,
yeah, some people wear the two of them, a wig and a...
Okay, whatever. No.
Right, because of that.
Mostly covering that. The real thing is the idea of the hair was
no, the covering of the hair. So if the hat covers a good part of the head...
No, so the wig covers the hair. You could say you get a wig, which is mostly the case. So the wig is more attractive than the hair.
Yeah, that's the issue.
Right, so I'm saying
that's why some rabbis are against it, especially the wigs of today.
Even though the halacha is in the hair, but if they want to be covering their attraction, is the halacha?
No, the halacha is that the natural hair of a woman should be covered.
Right, but then if you show
so the question is, well, if it's a wig, does that cause a problem?
No, but
because the se'ar, the natural hair is like a herba. Exactly.
So if the wig becomes more attractive.
But some claim that it's not. That you can actually distinguish the difference. Her natural personal hair and the hair that she put on top of it.
Yeah, but even if you could distinguish.
Then it doesn't have the same effect. It doesn't have the same effect.
Someone could have distinguished her. The wig is much nicer than...
Makes no difference. Even if it's nicer looking than her real hair, it does not have the same effect on human beings. Right. Once upon a time, that's exactly what they did. The head was covered one way or another. Right. Wigs were not used as much. Right. Yes.
No matter how nice it is, it still natural has a special
appeal. The natural has a special appeal. Right. And human beings, we are told, are not affected as much by hair that is not the woman's natural hair. Even if they don't know. That's where their argument lies in. Even if they don't know. Even though it looks like it's so natural, it's so real, it just does not have the same effect. And that is why some are more lenient with it. And some say no. It's so attractive. It defeats, like you said, the whole purpose. So there's various opinions on it. And the ones that are most problematic are the ones that are human hip, that look very, very different. That is why you have some that do both. By the way, a woman who is divorced needs to wear something too. The only women that do not have to cover their head are singles who were never married. A widow, a divorcee, to continue wearing some head covering. What's wrong with the man wearing the toupee? The only issue about toupees is whether he needs to make a beracha with a kippah or with the toupee. The toupee is sufficient.
Really?
Yeah, that's the only issue that when they discuss toupees. Yeah. Yeah, well, he should say it with the kippah anyway, even though he has a toupee. He said because of marit ayin. People do not know, right? So he should cover his head. That's the only issue of toupees.
I don't need the kippah.
All right, let's go on. The next issue is interfering with pregnancy. Interfering with pregnancy can come about in two ways: chas v'shalom, abortion, or contraceptives. Abortion is completely assumed in the Torah. The only exception to that is the woman, if the woman's life is that. There's differences as far as the onesh b'shamayim, in how strict they will be with an individual who committed something at the various stages of the development of the fetus, but it's still asur. Even zera levatala is asur. So at all times, abortion is asur unless the woman's life is. So even if the child, somehow they detect there's something unhealthy about the child, you cannot abort the child. That may be the tikkun of the child. No, that may be the tikkun of the child, that he's born, chas v'shalom, with some defect. You can't stop it for him. You can't stop that life for him. We cannot play God and decide who's going to live and who's going to die. Maybe that child will bring them back together, right? Makes no difference. It's a sugamur. There's no permission to abort a fetus which already have in the Shema entering it. I told you there's differences. Obviously, of course, the onesh, the severity of the maaseh is different, whether it's before 40 days or after. I agree with that. But regardless, one is not allowed to abort a child at any time, even if they're getting divorced. Even if they froze it. You know how today they freeze the eggs and all these things? You cannot just destroy it. It's not a simple matter. Obviously, there is a difference in the severity of the maaseh between something that is done early on and something that is done later on, when it's fully developed. I agree with that, but it's still, at all times, a woman is prohibited from aborting her fetus unless her life is in danger. That's the only exception. Makes no difference. It makes no difference, right? In any situation that arises, of course, one should consult a rabbi, because the situation has to be weighed and analyzed, what the repercussions are, what problems can arise as a result to the woman, to the mother. So I'm just giving you general information here, and I'm not telling you to apply this to every single case. But abortion is something very, very serious. It's almost like murder. Almost like, yes? Her physical life is in danger, not a nervous breakdown, not her reproductive capability. And this can happen. You know when this can happen? Well, we'll talk about it when we talk about the next point about preventing or contraceptive. Yes. Now I'm talking about destroying even that which is frozen. Okay, this is as far as abortion is concerned. That's something very serious. But what about contraceptive? Contraceptive means preventing pregnancy. There are times that a woman is allowed to do certain things to prevent pregnancy. It has to be done in consultation with the rabbi. It has to be done in consultation with the rabbi. A woman and a husband cannot decide on their own when to use the contraceptives because of the mitzvah of pur and because of other reasons too. The other reasons have to do with that certain contraceptives are almost like mini abortions, or it could be like zera levatala. So there are various types. The pill is one of the safest ones for the woman and for achieving a successful contraceptive. But even so, you cannot do it on your own unless you've consulted with a rabbi, and depending on the circumstances, it may or may not be. One of those times, for example, that this issue may arise is when a woman has had several cesarean births, and if she becomes pregnant again immediately right after her just recent birth, it may cause a big problem. I just gave you a quick example of an issue that may arise where contraceptives may be allowed, but even so, depending on the method, not just any method. Not every method is acceptable. So there are diaphragms, there are certain types of pills, and other things that are inserted that may be permissible only in consultation with a rabbi. So even though I've said that there are times that they're not going to be permissible, a husband, however, can never use any form of contraceptive himself. What I mean is anything that will create zera levatala, to shed a seed in pain, is completely asur for the husband. So even though the woman may do certain things to stop the pregnancy, only in consultation with the rabbi, a husband is basically limited. He cannot do anything. And what applies to the two of them that they can never do, neither of the two, is anything which is called sirus. Sirus means sterilizing. A husband or a woman cannot sterilize it. So a woman may not, how do you say that? Tie her tubes, for example. Neither can a man do anything that will tie him up and not allow him to be able to procreate. So for the two of them, it's assumed to do an actual maaseh to their body to become srisim, in other words, mesurasim. I just gave a typical example of a health issue where she's had 2 or 3 cesarean births. We know that if she has another child immediately after the most recent birth, that because of her history of cesarean births, there might be a danger to her life. So she may be allowed. It has to be evaluated. I'm not just saying she should. It has to be evaluated. Perhaps she should be given time to recover, to recuperate, to become stronger. So all these situations where they may be permissible need to be consulted with the rabbi. They need to be evaluated. And it may be mutar. And even then, not every method is mutar. Yes. I was very general. I don't want to go into every single type of example because everybody has a different situation. You can't compare A to B. Generally speaking, financial situation should not be the issue because it shows a lack of bitachon on one's part. But the physical, mental state of the woman, her weak nerves, her physical state, anything that's related to the physical state of mind, emotionally, physically, psychologically, and other issues that affect the two of them at home, as a whole, as a unit, these things are considered and evaluated. But just finances, that's not something that one should consider an issue as far as the No, there's no zera about the life. She takes certain contraceptives. As long as the husband is not doing something to himself, if he's doing everything properly, no, it's not. Depending on what she does. Some may be a problem, according to some opinion. Depending on the method the woman uses, it may be a problem or may not be. No, it's not about the law, because even when a woman is pregnant, nothing can happen. It's not called about the law. Or if a woman is already old, it's not about the law, right? So same thing, there are certain things she may do, consultation with the rabbi, depending on the situation. And there are many situations where she may be allowed. Every situation has to be evaluated. So I don't want to give you too many specific cases. I just was trying to be general. All right, real quickly, let's go to some additional halachot of yichud. As you know, man and woman have to be very careful if they're not married to each other, if they're not directly related, like a father with a daughter, mother with a son, to be in the same room with nobody else in it, unless that room, the door to the room opens up to the outside of the street, or unless, for example, if it's a man, his wife is with him at the time. Now, according to the Bet Yosef, according to the Shulchan Aruch, we are mahmir, even if it's one woman with many men, or one man with several women. Regardless. What? Yes? It's lechatchila, depending on the circumstances. If the room is locked, especially if it's at night, right? One has to be careful with all of this. Now, no, it all depends. There are exceptions, and I was going to get to that, right? But just remember, if the door is unlocked, then you've solved most of your problem. Or let's say a woman who's with another man, but her husband is in town. He can come in at any moment. So she's afraid to do anything that would be permissible if her husband is in town. Now, as far as being together, this applies to even two single people who are not married to each other. Even though it's Din Torah, it only applies to Erva, to Arayot. Single woman is not, according to the Din Torah, is not Erva. One can marry her. So there's not. Nevertheless, today it's prohibited in the time of David HaMelech. Or even for a single woman to be together with another man, unless the door is open, unless there's other people there. So it's not a simple matter. One should not take this very lightly. Arayot is a big problem, and it could lead to all sorts of trouble. So depending on the situation, unlock to the outside where you can come in. The door is unlocked. Now this is an issue, especially. It's not very common. I mean, it could happen. You go over somebody's house and there's nobody there. But you know where this is a big problem? If two people are renting the same apartment, boy and a girl cannot rent the same unit, even though each one has their own room. That could be a problem. See what I mean? Even though they're locking their room, that's their apartment unit, and some people might be tempted to save some money, right? Not for a long period of time. If it's a temporary situation, a brother and sister could be in the same apartment. If it's a permanent situation, the answer is no. Temporary, up to 30 days. Yeah. A brother and sister, even though they're brother and sister, after they're older, right, they cannot be in the same apartment on a permanent basis. Makes no difference if she's older or he's older. This doesn't make too much of a difference. You have to be very careful, but there are ways to overcome the problem. If a woman has a little girl with her, and the little girl already understands what sniut is, she's not an infant. she has busha and she's aware of certain things, and she's with that woman, then it's okay for that woman to be with that man. That's another example where there would not be Yehud. So if there is any she'ela that you may have about Yehud, let me know and we'll look into it. Right. No, that's not called Yehud. That's not called Yehud. Yehud is in a room that's locked. Not in an elevator necessarily, even though according to some, not in a car either. But if you're in a very far away place where there are no lights, and there's no people, that's a whole different story. I'm talking about in town, in the city. If you're driving, no problem. Brothers and sisters is not as a suit. It's not as a problem as somebody else. How young she is, or she's already married. Talking about kissing. Well, touching is also a suit for an erva, but it's not as big as a problem. Showing more chibat. It all depends on the age. What age we're dealing with. The older the two are, if the two of them are older, they should stay away from. Okay, we don't have that much time left, so let me quickly go through the tikkunim. If a woman who was a nida, by mistake she was with her husband, something happened accidentally, whether it was accidentally to the man or to the woman, there are various tikkunim, depending on the situation. I can't give you specific details for everyone, but in general terms, they would be required to fast for 40 days, according to the halakha. Now, 40 days means from morning to the evening. It doesn't have to be done day after day. It can be done every Monday and Thursday. However, today, because we are weak and we don't have the strength to fast so much, it can be redeemed with tzedakah. As you know, what's required is first of all teshuvah, regret, remorse. Tehillim is very powerful. Tzedakah is very powerful. All of this should be done regardless. But if one wants to do a good kapara, besides the tehillim and the tzedakah, one should try to fast. If she can't or he can't, then the fast should be redeemed with money. The way to do it is to figure out how much pain would the fast give you, and the equivalent pain of how much money it would take to give you. In other words, if you can't part with $100, that is one way of looking at it. So the pain of the $100 is equivalent to the pain of the fasting of the day. You can use that as an example. Or some say the value of a korban chatat. How much an animal would cost you if you had to bring a korban chatat today. So anyway, if this question comes up, I'd rather discuss it privately because every situation is different. If somebody has shalom nichshal, the individual who nichshal in the avon of nidah. No, the father or the mother only. With keri, with zera levatala, it's also very, very serious. One of the best tikkunim is for a person to that day to go to the tevilah if he can, to destroy the kitruk, the mashchit, the mechabed that was created as a result of the zera levatala. There are certain prakim in Tehillim that should be said, and I wrote them down here. Tet zayin lamed bet, mem aleph, mem bet, nun tet ayin zayin, tzadik kuf hey, kuf lamed zayin, and kuf nun. I'll discuss it later on again. I'm just giving you a list of ideas for a person for the man who had zera levatala. The best way to safeguard yourself from this is for the man. It's a great idea to wear tzitzit at night if he has a problem with that. Not to think or to have bad thoughts during the day, of course, is very helpful. To learn Torah is very powerful. To read or to learn from the Sefer Tanat Ve'Eliyahu is also very powerful segulat to prevent him from having all sorts of bad thoughts or having problems at night. And bedtime, thank you very much. And Shema Israel, if you say B'Chavanah Gdolah, is also very powerful. Sleeping in the right direction. There's various things that one can do to prevent this from happening. If we have time, I just want to go over a story or two that happened to people who were not careful with Taharat HaMishpacha. As you know, the bottom line with Taharat HaMishpacha is that we're dealing with a tremendous amount of Kedusha or a lack of it. The rabbis tell us that the highest levels of Kedusha one attains dafka through being careful from arayot and mishmirat ha'inayim, from what he allows his eyes to see or not to see. So the best way to attain great levels of Kedusha is by being careful dafka in this area of arayot. There was a woman who had a terrible dream. Her husband who had departed was coming. In the dream he wanted to bite her. He wanted to attack her. And this dream would repeat itself many times. I think in the dream the husband was in chains and he wanted to bite her and he wanted to attack her. So what happened is she went to see a rabbi and the rabbi said, tell me the truth. Did you ever at any time not go to the mikveh or not count the right amount of days? And the wife at the end admitted that only one time, counted less days than what she was supposed to. As a result of that, in other words, she made him fall into the trap of nidah. Because of that, upstairs,
they were punishing him for that. But it wasn't completely his fault. So he was coming, bothering his wife about it. So the wife says, what could I do about it? Because he comes back every single night and I have all these nightmares. So the rabbi told her, do you have any daughters? She says, yes, but they're totally secular. They don't keep Tarat HaMishpacha either. He says, you better convince them. If you have to cry to them. Because otherwise your husband will not have any menucha, neither will you. At the end she was able to convince the daughters that it was that their father, Bashamayim, did not have any menucha. And once the Baruch Hashem took upon himself to keep Tarat HaMishpacha, she saw her husband again in a dream. In that dream, he was already all smiles. He was happy. He was Baruch Hashem already menucha. Another quick story about a woman who was not careful with Tarat HaMishpacha. And one night, the Balanit, the mikveh lady, heard a knock on her door at 12 o'clock. No woman goes that late. So she was curious. Who's knocking on her door that late at night? And it was a woman who says, I'm sorry, could you please take me to the mikveh? I really have to go to the tevilah. She said, okay, what can I do? So she went and opened the tevilah, and the woman tells the mikveh lady, put your finger into the water. Just your finger. As soon as she put her finger, the skin started peeling because it was boiling hot, the water. So the mikveh lady turns to this woman who just came to her. How do you expect to go into this mikveh? It's boiling water. It's boiling hot right now. She says, you don't understand. I'm not alive. I'm already a neshama that departed from this world. And this is my punishment. And I have to immerse myself in this boiling hot water because I was not careful while I was alive to go to the mikveh. As soon as she immersed herself, she disappeared. There are countless stories of people who, because they were not careful, what tikkun they needed to go through in this world to be mechaper, to atone for their sin. I want to finish with the last story, an incredible story of a woman and her daughter who were on the train to one of the concentration camps in Europe, and they were in wagons, crowded, stuffed like cattle. Many of them suffocated. There was barely any window open. The window that was in the wagon was very, very small. This mother who was traveling with her daughter thought of an idea. The window was just big enough to throw her daughter out the window, and hopefully, B'ezrat Hashem, she will land safely, she will run away and build a home again and survive. She still has to go through many, many miracles, to run away from the Germans. But right before she carries out her plan, she has a conversation with her daughter, who I think at the time was 7 years old. My dear daughter, you don't know too much about Judaism. You're only 7 years old. I only want you to know one thing, and that's the most important thing to me. If you keep this, you're my daughter. If you do not keep this, I don't want to know anything. You're no longer my daughter. And it's called mikveh. Just remember mikveh. Remember the word mikveh. And now you don't understand what it is. Right before you get married, as soon as you're engaged, the favor I ask of you now is to go to a rabbi, wherever you may be living, and ask him what mikveh is. And do exactly as he will tell you. Those were the only instructions this mother gave this daughter, and she threw her out the window, and luckily this girl survived. This girl moved to Israel, and she grew up in a kibbutz, a secular kibbutz like many other Israelis who came after the Holocaust to Israel, and she didn't know anything about Judaism. And she met a man, and they liked each other, and they decided they're going to get married. And before they got married, she actually agreed to his proposal of getting married, she told him, listen, I have one condition. And he told her the story with the mother. This is what my mother demanded of me. This is what she expects of me. And no way in the world will I get married until I go and speak to a rabbi about mikveh. And she went and spoke to a rabbi. The rabbi spoke to him and explained to them all the halachot of mikveh. And they got married. Now I'm going to take you 30, 40 years later. 30, 40 years later, the man is in a hospital. This man, the husband, he's an older man, in his 60s or in his 70s. And in the same hospital room, there's another man. This man is secular, and the one next to him in the same room is a religious person. They're both sharing the same room. And this religious man noticed something very, very strange. Who were the visitors of this secular kibbutznik all these days? Who are all his visitors? Abrechim, Talmidei Chachamim, with beards, pe'ot, yeshiva boys, coming to see the secular man. So he couldn't understand what's going on over here. What do they have to do with him? He's completely secular. That's the way, at least, what he looks like. So one day he couldn't hold himself back. This religious fellow was on the bed next to him and asks him, can you tell me who are all these visitors coming to see you? They're obviously all religious. And the man starts telling the story of who his wife was as a little girl and what the mother asked of her and how she, before they got married, insisted that they go to the rabbi and explain to them what mikveh is. This is exactly what they did. So despite the fact that they were secular and they kept nothing, this is the only thing they kept. And now he turns to the religious man. You know who these people that you saw? They're all my kids. They're my son-in-laws. All my children are religious. All my children are Talmidei Chachamim. All my son-in-laws are Avrechim in Kolelim. So I guess it has to do with the mikveh. So even though they were a secular couple that grew up in a kibbutz, as a result of the mother demanding that only one condition of her daughter, that she keep this, and they did keep it, and they kept it in Kol HaHidurim, with all the details, they were worthy and they had a zechut of seeing beautiful children, religious hatanim. You see the importance of this mitzvah of mikveh. It's not something to take lightly. We're not talking already about the seriousness of the avon, chas v'shalom, somebody's nechshav, that he needs a tikkun. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of course, mochel v'soleach, HaKadosh Baruch Hu does atone those who did not know, who were unaware, and did it bishgaga. There's a big difference between shogeg and mezid, and that is why there's teshuvah. Somebody who did it b'shogeg, unintentionally, he was unaware of how serious this was. There is a way to be mechaper, to be metaken, and through the proper teshuvah, which involves the tehillim, the tzedakah, the harata, and the regret, a person is able to be mechaper even on something like this, on something as serious as the nidah. But obviously, what may be difficult to repair is children who may have been born without the woman, the mother going to them. They have a little bit of a defect called ben hanidah or bat hanidah. However, even that, which is difficult to repair for the father and mother, they themselves, the girl or the boy, who were born to such parents, will be able to erase or to remove that tumah if they on their own elevate themselves to high levels of kedusha by learning Torah or by being osek b'mitzvot. That koach of the kedusha has the ability, the power to remove, to drive away even the little bit of tumah that was absorbed in them at birth. Obviously, if the husband and wife would have kept the mitzvah, the dinim of tarat mishpacha, they would have avoided themselves a lot of trouble, a lot of problems. Because as I said earlier on, it also affects which neshama enters the body. But let's not lose hope. Anybody, chas v'shalom, that was unaware and did something like this b'shgaga, is still able to repair it, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, b'chazda gadol, will accept their teshuvah. Okay, that does it for Tarat HaMishpacha. B'ezrat Hashem, next week we will be beginning Shabbat. This is a series of the fundamentals of Judaism. We started off with Kashrut. We went to Tarat HaMishpacha, and we have quite a few number of weeks. I think about 14 of Shabbat that will carry us throughout the summer. So next week we'll be giving an introduction of what Shabbat is. The same way I gave an introduction to Kashrut and Tarat HaMishpacha, we'll give an introduction to Shabbat, and then we'll follow with the Halachot, the many concepts that people are unaware of, that should be aware of, because Shabbat happens every week, not once a month. And rabbis tell us, whoever does not learn Halachot Shabbat, or whoever does not review them, it's almost impossible that he keeps everything properly. For sure, nichshal. In other words, he makes mistakes. So the Halachot Shabbat, there are many. Once we learn them, we will continuously need to review them so we don't forget them. B'ezrat Hashem, we'll see you next week.